She stood alone in the bathroom, barefoot, wrapped in a towel still damp from the shower she barely remembered taking. The early morning light spilled through the cracked window blinds, soft and golden, but did nothing to steady her hands. She couldn't stop staring. 2 pink lines, faint but undeniable, positive, pregnant, and just like that, the quiet world around her fractured, like glass dropped on marble. Her breath caught, her knees weakened. Everything in her begged this to be some kind of mistake. But it wasn't, she whispered, almost pleading, "No, this can't be real." But it was. And the only name that floated in front of her mind was one she tried hard to forget. Mason, the man who disappeared before sunrise. He wasn't supposed to mean anything. Just one night, one stolen moment, one breath of warmth during a season of cold. But that night, it felt like so much more. She remembered it in fragments now, like pages torn from a dream she never finished reading. A crowded gala. She was there working, pouring champagne, balancing silver trays, trying to blend into the wallpaper. He was alone in the corner, eyes distant, posture perfect but hollow. There was something about the way he looked at the world, as if it had once betrayed him deeply, and he hadn't quite forgiven it. He didn't flirt. He didn't try to impress. He just saw her, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself be seen. They talked. They laughed. She wasn't sure how it happened, only that it felt right, like they'd both been waiting for that exact moment, without knowing it. She remembered how he kissed her, like he didn't know how to ask for more time, so he poured everything into that one touch, and how, afterward, he held her like she wasn't a mistake, like maybe she could be someone's beginning instead of someone's regret. Then morning came, and he was gone. No number, no goodbye, just a quiet echo of a night that never should have mattered, but somehow did. She told herself it didn't mean anything, that he probably did this all the time, that it was better to forget. But now, 3 months later, how could she forget? Because this wasn't just a memory. This was a baby, and she was completely alone. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Mason hadn't forgotten her, not for a single day. He wasn't just a stranger at a gala. He was Mason Cole, a tech CEO, a billionaire. And just weeks after that night, his world shattered too, an accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down and hidden from public view ever since. He believed their night together was a gift, a kindness, something sacred he was never meant to keep. But fate had other plans. Because sometimes the people who vanish are the ones our hearts never stop waiting for. And sometimes love isn't a rescue, it's a return. Welcome, my beautiful souls, to the chapters of love, where fleeting nights can echo into forever, and the most unexpected moments can write our most unforgettable stories. If you believe love has a way of circling back, no matter how broken or lost, go ahead and tap that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who still believes in second chances, because this chapter is only the beginning. Before the pregnancy test, before the fear, before his name became a wound she whispered into pillows at midnight, they were just 2 strangers, 2 broken people orbiting around each other, not knowing they were about to collide. Sienna Rivera didn't believe in forever. She'd learned not to. Life had never been kind enough to offer her permanence. Raised in the foster system, she grew up packing bags more often than she unpacked dreams. Every home came with rules. Every smile had strings. And every time she let herself hope, reality snapped her back like a slingshot. So she stopped hoping. She worked hard, kept her head down, never owed anyone anything. By 24, she'd become an expert at surviving. Her mornings began in paint, smeared on thrifted canvases, splashed across her tiny apartment walls. Her nights were spent in black slacks and sensible flats, pouring drinks and memorizing orders at a rooftop bar downtown. She called herself a waitress with a sketch pad, but her heart whispered different things. That night, the night everything changed, she didn't want to go to work. It was the annual Winter Foundation Gala, held in the ballroom of the tallest building in the city. Gold-plated everything. Champagne towers. Guests with diamonds that cost more than her entire life savings. Sienna was there to serve. and to hide. She told herself it was just another shift. She didn't know Mason Cole would be there. Not many people did. To most of the world, Mason was still recovering overseas. That's what the tabloid said after the accident. Some vague press release about a car crash in the Swiss Alps. No one had seen him since. Once, he had been the golden boy of tech, the brilliant mind who turned code into capital, charm into billion-dollar deals. Cole Technologies didn't just lead the industry. It shaped the future. But all of that changed in an instant. They said he was lucky to be alive. But Mason didn't feel lucky. He hadn't walked since that night. And worse, he hadn't felt like himself since. He moved through the world now with a kind of silence. Everything about him was restrained. His voice, his eyes, even his presence. Power used to wrap around him like a second skin. Now he wore distance instead. He came to the gala only because it honored his late mother, a woman who believed deeply in legacy, even if her son no longer knew where his own was going. He didn't expect to stay long. He didn't expect her. She was across the room, dark curls tucked beneath a simple bun, balancing a silver tray with practiced grace. But it wasn't her posture that caught him. It was her eyes. They held storms, secrets, silence, the kind of silence that matched his own. Their first real moment happened near the terrace. She had slipped outside just for a breath, unaware he had done the same. The air was cool. The city sparkled beneath them. For once, no one else was watching. He spoke first. "Rough night." She turned, startled. "Sorry, am I not supposed to be out here?" He shook his head. "No rules out here. Just air." She smiled faintly. "Then I'm exactly where I need to be." It wasn't flirting. It wasn't even particularly memorable. But it felt easy. And Mason hadn't felt easy in a long time. They talked. Nothing groundbreaking. At first, she teased him for his tie. He countered with a story about the time he set off a fire alarm at a gala in Tokyo. Her laugh came out reluctantly, like she hadn't used it in a while. He noticed that. Then the conversation shifted. From jokes to truths. She admitted she used to draw fairy tales as a kid, until she realized no one ever wrote happy endings for girls like her. He told her he once believed success would make him feel whole, until he woke up in a hospital bed and realized he didn't know who he was without control. She blinked. "You're not like these people, are you?" He tilted his head. "You see through people, don't you?" "Only the ones hiding," she whispered. Their eyes held for a second too long. And in that fragile pause between breath and heartbeat, something changed. They weren't strangers anymore. That night wasn't supposed to happen. She didn't go home with men. Not ever. And he hadn't let anyone that close since the accident. But some nights don't wait for logic. Some hearts recognize their mirror the moment it appears. So they left, quietly. No drama. Just two souls choosing not to be lonely for one night. Her apartment was barely more than a shoebox. But to him, it felt like sanctuary. No spotlight. No pressure. No pity. She lit a candle. He sat on the floor. They talked about music. She told him her mother might have been a singer. He said his mother used to read him poems and call them blueprints for the soul. They shared things they hadn't said out loud in years. And when he reached for her, it was a desire that led the way. It was relief. They kissed like people who'd forgotten how, then remembered everything at once. She traced the line of his jaw like it might disappear. He touched her face like it was the first real thing he'd felt in weeks. When they undressed, there was hesitation, tenderness, a question in his eyes. "Are you sure?" She answered with her hands. That night wasn't about lust. It was about breath, about choosing one moment of real. They didn't make promises. They didn't say forever. They just were. By the time sunlight crept through the window, Sienna was asleep, curled against him like she belonged there. Mason lay awake beside her, memorizing the rise and fall of her breath, telling himself not to stay, because he couldn't give her the story she deserved. Not with his legs still numb, not with the world waiting outside, not with his fear of becoming someone's burden. So when morning came, he left. He told himself it was better that way. She'd forget him. He'd carry the memory. and they would go back to being strangers. But fate had never been interested in their plans. And one night, just one, was all it took to write the first line of a chapter neither of them saw coming. We find Sienna again, this time not in the golden haze of candlelight, but under harsh fluorescent bathroom light. She's kneeling on cold tile. One hand grips the sink. The other clutches her stomach. This isn't a hangover. This isn't nerves. This is something else entirely. She closes her eyes, breathes deep, but the nausea comes in waves, sharp, undeniable, too loud to ignore now. She decided to run a pregnancy test, surrounded by 3 open pregnancy tests, all positive. She told herself it was impossible. That one night couldn't lead to forever. But sometimes, fate doesn't wait for permission. She paces her apartment, runs hands through her hair, laughs once, dry and almost bitter. What now? She doesn't even know him. She doesn't have his number, his address, or even his last name. He'd left before sunrise, remember? No note, no promise. Just vanished like a dream she was never meant to keep. And she tried to forget. She told herself it didn't matter, that they'd shared a moment, not a future, that it would be easier to let him go. But now her body was writing his name into her blood. She had to find him. Sienna doesn't tell many people what happened, but she confides in one person, her best friend, Kyra. Loyal, sarcastic, Google-obsessed Kyra. Kyra leans back on the couch, phone in hand, eyebrows raised. So let me get this straight. Mystery man, rich voice, wore designer shoes, walked with a cane, maybe? Left at dawn? No number? Sienna nods. Just Mason. Kyra whistles. Girl, you really live in a romance novel. Sienna smiles faintly. Except the author forgot to write a happy ending. Let's start with what we do know. Gala. Fancy crowd. Date. 3 weeks ago. Winthrop Foundation. Kyra grins. Buckle up. What follows is a quiet montage of online searches. Cross-reference gala guest lists. High-res paparazzi photos. Slow zooms on blurred faces. And then, there he is, still in that navy tux. Still watching the skyline, like it holds the answers. But the name below the image stops her breath cold. Mason Devereaux. Not just Mason. Mason Devereaux. Founder and CEO of Devereaux Innovations. Billionaire tech visionary. Harvard dropout turned Silicon Valley golden boy. And beneath all that, a headline. Where's Mason Devereaux now? Inside the tragic accident that left the tech titan paralyzed. Sienna stares at the screen. She doesn't blink. She doesn't breathe. The man who made her feel safe was a ghost hiding in plain sight. She clicks the article, fingers trembling. Mason Devereaux has not been seen in public since a spinal cord injury last year. Friends say he's withdrawn from the public eye. Sources suggest he's receiving intensive care at an undisclosed location. Some question whether he will ever return to the helm of his company. A sharp exhale escapes her lips. Paralyzed, Sienna slides down the wall, phone still glowing in her palm. A million thoughts run through her at once, but none land. Who was he that night? Why didn't he tell her? And why, despite everything, does she still feel like she knows him? She remembers his touch. Gentle, controlled, respectful. She remembers how he hesitated, how he asked if she was sure. She remembers something deeper than lust, something honest. Now, she understands what he never said. The cane, the seated posture at the gala, the heaviness in his eyes. He wasn't running from her. He was hiding from the world, maybe even from himself. And now, she cares a part of him. She's not angry, just stunned, and more alone than she thought possible. The man she couldn't find might not want to be found. But if he knew, would it change anything? She scrolls through more headlines. His foundation, his disappearance. Photos of him before the crash. Standing tall, confident, immortal. And others after. Blurry, wheelchair-bound, surrounded by security. Grim-faced. The world doesn't seem to see him anymore. Just his story. But Sienna remembers the man behind the shadow, the way he whispered about his mother's poetry, the way his hand trembled slightly before touching hers. And now, the question burns inside her like wildfire. Should I tell him? What if he doesn't want this? What if it breaks him more? What if she's just another problem he didn't ask for? She places her palm over her stomach, closes her eyes, breathes deep, and then, finally, says the words out loud. He deserves to know. But where do you begin looking for a ghost? What would you do in her place? Would you keep it to yourself, or try to find a man who might not be ready for this kind of truth? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story has touched your heart. There's more to come. A sleek black car glides to a stop outside a towering glass building in downtown San Francisco, its engine cutting through the early morning hush. Sienna steps out, dressed in borrowed confidence and a blazer she doesn't feel worthy of. Her palms are sweaty, but her grip on the manila folder is steady. Inside, fake business credentials, a portfolio of art prints. She's pretending to pitch for the company's next project. This wasn't how she imagined seeing him again. But sometimes life doesn't give you clean chances, only messy ones. She walks into the lobby, breathes, tells the receptionist she has a noon meeting with the CEO to present custom environmental artwork for their next wellness campaign. The woman at the desk raises an eyebrow but calls upstairs. 10 minutes later, Sienna is in the elevator. Each floor they rise feels like a step back in time, like rewinding to a memory she wasn't sure was even real anymore. The doors open. She's led through a pristine hallway, all chrome and hush. Then, he's there, Mason Devereaux, at the far end of the room, behind a walnut desk that looks too large for him now. His posture is different, straighter, but not stronger. He sits in a wheelchair, sleek, high-tech, but still. Sienna's breath catches. His eyes lift. They scan her. Blank, polite, professional, nothing. She knew his face better than her own reflection, but to him, she was just another meeting on the calendar. Ms. He begins, glancing at the folder. She steps forward. Sienna Rhodes. Still nothing, not even a flicker. She lays out the prints, speaks confidently about mood and color theory. All the while, she watches his eyes, searching, wondering. Then something flickers. His gaze lingers, longer than it should. She dares to meet it. And there it is, recognition. His mouth parts slightly. You... Sienna nods once. Me. The silence stretches. He looks shaken, disoriented, as if reality just kicked in the door. I thought you left, he says quietly, without a word. I thought you did, she replies. You were gone before sunrise. I woke up to an empty bed, he says. I thought I dreamed you. A bitter laugh escapes her lips. Some dream. He leans back slowly, rubs his temple. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Well, here I am. Her voice tightens. And I didn't come just to show you watercolor palettes, Mason. His eyes rise, cautious. She takes a deep breath. Then, I'm pregnant. It lands like a lightning strike. He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. Just sits there, reeling. In his silence, she hears every fear he won't name. Every wall he'd rebuild around the softest part of himself. She continues. I didn't know who you were that night. I just knew how you made me feel. Safe, seen. And then you were gone. And then all this. She gestures to her stomach. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just thought you had a right to know. Still, nothing. His hands, gripping the chair's wheels, have turned pale. She steps back. I'll leave you with that. He finally speaks. Sienna, wait. But she's already halfway out the door. Later that night, Mason sits alone in the dark of his penthouse. The city glows beneath him, but all he sees is her face. Pregnant, with his child. He'd spent months feeling like half a man, a broken leader in a world that valued power and pace. And now, suddenly, he was someone's beginning. He pulls out his phone, hesitates, starts a text, deletes it, calls her number, hangs up, He doesn't know what to say, but he can't stop thinking of her. And maybe that means something. Mason hadn't moved from his office chair in hours. The city pulsed outside the window, but in here, everything was still. The clock ticked. The silence wrapped around him like a shroud. He kept replaying her voice in his mind. The way Sienna had stood in front of him, pregnant with his child, eyes wide with fragile courage, and heart open just enough to be hurt again. And he'd said nothing, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and didn't know how to carry all that love in a broken body. How could he explain the fear? The aching, gnawing belief that he wasn't whole anymore, that he couldn't protect her, couldn't raise a child, couldn't offer her the life she deserved. He was a man who once conquered boardrooms and dominated Forbes lists. But now, he couldn't even feel the ground beneath his feet. Couldn't offer her a normal family, a normal life. And so he stayed silent. And Sienna took that silence as his answer. She left without slamming the door, without tears, without begging him to say what he couldn't. She simply turned and walked out, carrying more than just their unborn children. She carried the crushing weight of disappointment. He hadn't just broken her heart. He confirmed her worst fear, that this had only ever meant something to her. She believed he regretted it all. The night they shared, the life now growing between them. And though she tried to convince herself she didn't expect more, a part of her had hoped he would smile, hoped he would stand, even if only with words, hoped he would reach for her like she was worth the risk. But instead, he sat frozen, and she walked away with trembling hands tucked around her belly. That night, Sienna lay awake in her small apartment, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The moonlight painted long silver lines across the walls, and the city noise hummed in the distance. But all she could hear was her own breath, shaky and uneven. Her hand moved to her stomach, instinctively, protective, tender. He didn't want this, she whispered. He didn't want us. But it wasn't anger in her voice. It was hurt, that deep, silent ache that settles when your heart still loves the one who hurt it. At the same time, across town, Mason sat with his head in his hands in the therapy room he visited once a week and never spoke much in. But tonight, the words came out before he could catch them. I think I lost her. The therapist, a gentle man in his 50s with kind eyes, leaned in without saying anything. Mason swallowed hard. She came here. She told me she was pregnant with my kid, and I didn't say a damn thing. The therapist waited. I wanted to say everything. That I still think about her every day. That I remember the sound of her laugh. That I wake up wondering if that night even happened, or if I just dreamed it into something bigger than it was. A long silence. Then Mason added, quieter now, "But how do you tell a woman like that she deserves more than a man who can't even walk across the room to hold her?" The therapist finally spoke. "You tell her. You let her decide what you are or aren't worth. Because silence doesn't protect her. It only leaves her wondering." In the quiet nights that followed, they were both haunted by the same memories. The soft rustle of sheets, the warmth of skin against skin, the hush of laughter in the dark, the way her fingers traced the line of his jaw like she saw more than just his body, but his soul. And that look in her eyes, like she wasn't afraid of the wheelchair, the pain, the uncertainty, like she saw him and wanted him anyway. But now all of it felt like it belonged to someone else, a different version of themselves. One night, one spark, one moment suspended between fate and fear. Neither of them knew how to bridge the silence. Neither of them knew if they could, but both were aching. Have you ever let your fear of not being enough push someone away? What would you have done in Mason's place, or Sienna's? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters here in the chapters of love. The morning light spilled to the windows of Mason's penthouse, illuminating the dust that had settled in the corners of his life. For weeks, he'd been letting the world move without him, avoiding board meetings, ignoring calls, existing more than living. But this morning was different. He wheeled himself to the window, staring down at the city that once bowed to his ambition. And for the first time in a long time, he saw not buildings or mergers or quarterly growth charts. He saw her, Sienna, the woman who showed up with trembling hands and stubborn strength. The woman carrying a life they had made in one fleeting, unforgettable night. And he had let her walk away because he was too afraid to stand up emotionally, even if he couldn't physically. But fear had taken enough from him already. It had stolen his certainty, his movement, his peace. It would not steal her. That day he made calls, not to his assistant or legal team, but to his physical therapist, his business partner, his driver. The man who once isolated himself behind glass walls now invited the world back in. The next week, he returned to the office, not as the man who once ruled the floor, but as a man willing to relearn how to lead from a chair with wheels. His employees watched as he rolled through the lobby, not with pity but with awe, because power wasn't how he walked. It was in how he showed up despite it all. Late one evening, after the building emptied out and the city turned gold under the setting sun, Mason sat at his desk and typed a message. He read it twice, deleted it, typed it again. He needed it to be right, not polished, not perfect, just true. I thought you were the chapter one didn't deserve, but maybe you're the story I was meant to write. He hit send before fear could change his mind. Sienna received the message just as she was leaving her prenatal appointment. Her phone buzzed in her tote bag, but it wasn't until she settled on a bench outside the clinic, breathing the cool breeze, feeling the gentle flutter of life inside her, that she read it. Her heart squeezed. It wasn't the words alone. It was the man she remembered behind them, the quiet thoughtfulness, the kind of strength that didn't shout but stayed. She reread it once, then again. A slow tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't brush it away. Was it too late? Could she trust it? Could he really mean that? She didn't know. But the ache in her chest, the one that hadn't gone away since she left his office, began to loosen just slightly. Meanwhile, Mason sat alone in his penthouse once again. But tonight, something was different. He didn't feel powerless anymore, because for the first time, he'd stopped hiding behind what he couldn't do and started showing up for what and who he could still fight for. Do you believe that love is still worth fighting for, even when you're at your lowest? Let me know your thoughts below. And if this story is touching something in your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the chapters of love, where every story reminds us how beautiful second chances can be. 3 days passed before Sienna responded to Mason's message. She'd stared at it more times than she could count, not because she didn't feel something, but because she felt too much, and feelings she'd learned could be deceiving, especially when hope got involved. But there was one thing she couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just about her and Mason. There were two little heartbeats growing inside her, two lives she hadn't planned for, but already loved more than she could explain. So she sent a message. Short, simple. There's a prenatal scan this Friday. If you want to come, you can. When Friday came, she didn't expect him to show. She sat in the waiting room, hands pressed against her belly, mind tangled in nerves. The minutes stretched on. Her name was called, and just as she stood to walk in, he rolled through the door. Mason, clean-shaven, suit jacket folded in his lap, eyes locked on hers like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. Sienna blinked, startled, and then, without saying a word, she handed him the ultrasound pass. They went in together. The room was dim. A faint glow lit the monitor as the sonographer glided the probe across her belly. And then, there it was. That sound. Lube-dub, lube-dub, lube-dub. Not once, but twice. Two steady, beautiful heartbeats echoed through the silence. Mason's breath caught. His fingers, resting near hers on the edge of the exam table, curled slightly. Sienna looked at him, and for the first time, she saw the man, not the CEO, not the wheelchair, not the one-night memory. Just him, eyes glassy, jaw clenched, as if the gravity of it all had just hit him. He whispered, "They're real." She nodded, voice soft. "They're ours." After the appointment, they walked, or rather, she walked while he rolled through a nearby park. The air smelled like early spring, and the city noises faded behind the rustle of trees. He asked about her cravings. She confessed she cried watching cereal commercials. He laughed. Really laughed. That quiet. From the gut sound she hadn't heard since the night they met. They stopped at a bench under a blooming dogwood tree. She sat. He angled his chair beside her. Neither of them rushed a moment. It felt like returning to a conversation paused months ago, except now there was no tension, just space. Space for something new to breathe. That week, they met again, and again after that. They weren't dating, not officially. There were no grand labels or declarations, but there were tiny, soft moments. The way she'd bring him hand-painted cards after her doctor visits. The way he'd send books about parenting, or joke that their kids were already smarter than them because they had both brains. And sometimes, when the night stretched long, they'd sit in the garden of his home, her hand resting lightly on her stomach, his hand quietly over hers. No need for words, just presence. Sienna didn't realize when it happened, when the fear began to loosen its grip. Maybe it was the way Mason showed up, without needing credit or reward. Maybe it was how he never rushed her, or the pregnancy, or the pain. Or maybe it was just the way he looked at her. Not like someone he needed to fix or convince or keep, but like someone he'd never stopped choosing, even when she didn't choose herself. Some kinds of love are born in passion. Theirs was being reborn in quiet mornings, shared laughter, and the sound of twin heartbeats reminding them what truly mattered. It was raining that night. The soft kind, the kind that whispered against the windows instead of pounding them. Mason had invited her over to show her something, though he hadn't said what. Sienna was slower to say yes these days, but that night, something inside her told her to go. She wandered through his living room while he made tea. The space had changed since the first time she'd seen it. More light, fewer shadows. Like it had finally become someone's home. And then she saw it. A painting, hung on the far wall, quiet but impossible to miss. It was her, from that night, not in some seductive pose or anything overly romanticized. She was seated at the edge of the gallows rooftop, her back slightly turned, face caught in a laugh, her curls wild in the wind, her shoulders strong, her smile just soft enough. Sienna froze. The moment was unmistakable. She remembered it because that laugh had been real, rare, even then, and now it was framed in color. She turned as Mason rolled in, 2 mugs in his hands. "You kept a memory," she whispered. He looked at the painting, then at her. "I didn't keep it," he said softly. "I needed it." Sienna didn't speak. He placed the mugs down and wheeled closer, slowly, vulnerably. "You were never just one night to me," he murmured. "That night, I thought it would save me from feeling numb. But you made me feel everything again, and I panicked. I thought if I reached out, I'd ruin it. I've ruined so many things in my life already." She looked at him, really looked, and suddenly, the wall she built didn't feel so necessary. Because this wasn't the same man she left months ago. This was the man who came to her ultrasounds. The one who learned the rhythm of her silence. The one who painted her laugh, because he didn't know how else to remember it. She walked to him, slowly, his hands, resting gently on the arms of his chair, didn't move. But his eyes searched hers like a question he'd waited too long to ask. She bent slightly, her palm against his cheek. "I don't want perfect," she whispered. "I want honest." And then she kissed him, not rushed, not desperate, but certain. It was the kind of kiss that didn't need permission. It had already been written in the pauses between their moments, waiting to be spoken. When they pulled apart, their foreheads rested together. Her fingers slipped into his, and his thumb pressed gently into her palm. No more misunderstandings. No more what-ifs. Just this, whatever this would become. That night, they stayed like that, wrapped in quiet, wrapped in each other. Some loves explode like fireworks. Theirs was more like a steady flame, soft, unshakable, and finally, safe. Love stories don't always begin with candlelight and perfect timing. Sometimes they begin with pain, with a broken man in a wheelchair and a woman who never learned to trust that anyone would stay. Mason wasn't strong because of his title, his wealth, or his past accolades. In fact, all of that had been stripped from him the moment life changed. The real strength? That came later, when he stood tall without standing at all. When he chose to fight for a future he couldn't walk toward but could still build. And Sienna? She didn't fall into some fairy tale. She wasn't swept off her feet by some billionaire fantasy. She walked her way into motherhood, into love, into faith alone at first, then hand in hand with someone who didn't promise to fix her, but promised to hold her steady. Because strength isn't in the grand gestures. It's in the quiet resolve to stay. To stay, even when it's hard. To stay when it feels easier to run. To stay, not because you're needed, but because you choose to love. And maybe that's what we all crave in the end. Not perfection, but partnership. A love that doesn't rescue us, but walks or rolls beside us all the same. They didn't just find love. They built it with patience, with truth, with choice. And isn't that what real love is? Something that endures not because it's flawless, but because it's faithful. The soft coos of newborn twins fill the nursery. Warm morning light filters through gauzy curtains. Sienna is seated on the edge of the bed, one tiny bundle in her arms. Mason is beside her, his chair pulled close, holding their other baby, cradling a future he once thought he'd never deserve. He leans forward, his lips brushing her forehead, and, in a whisper meant only for her, "One night gave me you, but a lifetime won't be enough to love you." She closes her eyes, smiles, because she knows this time he means it. Hello, my beautiful souls. As this story closes, my heart lingers in the quiet moments where love wasn't loud or flashy, but real, steady, and earned. Isn't it something how a one-night chance, a brush with pain, or even a quiet act of courage can become the beginning of everything? Maybe you, too, have been Sienna, guarded, unsure, just trying to survive. Or maybe you felt like Mason, aching to be seen for who you are, not what you've lost. Wherever you are in your journey, know this: love doesn't always show up the way we expect. But when it does, it asks only for one thing: your willingness to believe again. If this story stirred something in you, please share it with someone whose heart might need reminding that even the most unexpected chapters can bring the deepest joy. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment below with your favorite moment, and subscribe to the Chapters of Love, where every story is crafted to remind you that you are never alone in what you feel. Until next time, keep believing in the quiet magic of love, the kind that stays, the kind that chooses you back.